Humanianity, a new religious call. Humanianity, religion for us all. Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we can be.
Hi, I'm Bill Van Fleet, and this is Humanianity Conversation number 65, recorded on July 24th, 2020. It is the 28th recorded conversation with my friend Mike. It was unusually short because Mike experienced a power outage that could not be reversed that day. We talked about how everyone is faced with his or her own subjective experience, including, of course, what others have told the person, and whether there is any way of concluding that one worldview, for example, containing or not containing the concept of a God, was correct or better than another. And we were just getting into the importance of the ability to predict as a way of judging points of view when Mike's power went down. We were planning to resume the conversation as soon as possible.
Hey,
Hi,
Bill.
Mike. Hey, good seeing you again.
I know, same here. How have you been these past several weeks?
Well, about the same as usual, making a little progress here and there. And I
Good.
know you've been through a rough time, so
Yeah, yeah. This
glad.
was really a pretty bad. I had a relapse
Um,
of, according to the doctor at least, I had a relapse of a sinus infection,
yeah.
and very. I would say the most discomfort, the most uncomfortable and painful
Mm,
sick illness I've had, probably besides a boil that I had a couple of years ago.
mm,
Very,
mm.
very bad. Like a very, very, very bad head cold with bloody nose and
Oh
all
my.
kinds of nasty things happening with my nose. In
Mm,
fact, there still feels like there's like rocks.
oh,
It's like dried mucus in my nose. It's very uncomfortable, but I have my tissue here, so
mm.
if you'll all excuse the maybe the constant blowing of my nose.
No
Um,
problem. No
hope I
problem.
know. Hope we'd have a good conversation. So
Yes.
um, we had. I recall what we were talking about.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't know if you want to continue with our conversations or you want to start something new. It's been a while.
Uh, I'd rather go with what your wishes are. I don't have any. I don't have any particular preference.
Okay. Um, yeah. Well, we were having a long series of discussions over several weeks
Hmm.
about how we orient ourselves to truth and understanding beliefs, and we had discovered that your orientation is certainly very different than mine,
Hmm.
and I had a tendency to orient myself to understanding kind of everything from the point of view of for lack of a better word, a first person point of view, a phenomenal, if you, for those familiar with philosophy, a phenomenological point of view. And we were about to discuss and explore those two different orientations
Hmm.
and the benefits or the pitfalls of
Hmm.
each.
Hmm.
Um, you want to continue with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that had, I think, come out for me when, sorry, when we had finished up talking was the kind of questioning the merits. You had me questioning the merits of my point of view, and you hadn't said this directly, but indirectly, I heard you. Not you didn't say this, but you got me thinking. Um, what is the point of trying to to understand the world according to the way it really is, quote unquote, and we can explore what that means, if it's always behind the curtain, so to speak. And that was an interesting argument that I thought has merit, because I think one of my points of view and orientation to understanding truth and beliefs and whatnot is to try to live as close to the way reality is. And that reality, not reality is the wrong word, the way things really are. And for me, that means the way we experience it. So maybe we could kind of start there.
Yes. And it might be a good idea, you're making reference to the metaphor that I use in my book on the mind-body problem, the business about the curtain. And although it would be very difficult for anybody first listening to us to understand what's in that book, which is free on the website, to give it a plug. It's book 3 on the mind-body problem. I think that we can. I think I can condense it pretty clearly here. Let me give it a try. That when we look at an object, what we are experiencing is our perception of the object. Presumably, if we take the scientific worldview, light bounces off the object. And so that now what is coming from the object to you or me is light waves. And then they have an influence on the retina, and it gets converted into nerve impulses that go into the brain. And so somehow, and here is where the mystery comes in, this then is associated with or correlated with a something we call consciousness of the object, or perception of the object. But that perception of the object is not the object. It is not the object. And the way that you can demonstrate that is have two different people look at the object from different perspectives. And you know that what each is experiencing is different than the other person. So there are 3 objects, one in the head of each of those two, and one that is the source of those experiences. So what we say is, what I say, terminology, is that what you're perceiving, the experience that you have, is a model of what is in reality. And by reality, I mean that which exists independent of you or I or anybody having any perception of it or beliefs about it. It's whatever is actually there and is not influenced by our perceptions of it and so on. Now, because our perception is only a model and our beliefs about it are only models, then we have the question as to how accurate those models are. And of course, we know that perceptions can be distorted, and we know that beliefs can be incorrect, and so on. So our models can be very accurate, or somewhat accurate, or totally inaccurate, or whatever. So that led to the metaphor that you referred to, which is all of us humans are out in an audience and in front of a stage, and across the stage is a curtain, and behind the curtain is reality. And there's also, it's a contest, so there's a conductor of the contest, and that conductor is asking, well, what is this that's behind the curtain like? And people in the audience can only say, well, it's like such and such, having to do with what they experience, what they, the only thing that they have to work with, their totality of experience, which in the book is referred to as the subjective model. And so they make guesses. Well, I think it's like such and such, and the report comes back. Well, that's pretty good. And then somebody else says, and I think it's like so and so. Well, that's a little better. And somebody else says, well, I think it's like such and such. Nope, sorry, that's not right. And that's all that ever happens. We get some idea as to how accurate the model is. And what determines the accuracy of the model? It's the predictability that it enables. In other words, if one's beliefs about something are accurate, then acting on those beliefs with the expectation that such and such will occur turns out not to be a mistake. If it's an inaccurate belief, it leads to a mistake. And an inaccurate perception, a distorted perception, would be one that, if you acted on the basis of it, would lead to a mistake or a surprise. So the only evidence we have for there being anything like reality is the ability to predict. And so what we have our subjective experience. We also conjure up in our minds, by virtue of what other people tell us, primarily, a whole different picture, like that wall looks solid to you, but it's actually mostly space made of atoms and various waves of probability of existence of certain entities and so on, and get into really strange things that actually can no longer really be imagined, because it's nothing like anything we actually experience. So they become, those models are essentially mathematical models that are equations having to do with measurements. And that's what modern science gets into it. But also somebody can tell you, your wife can tell you what her cousin has been doing in a distant state. And you would not have any way of knowing that in your subjective model. But on the other hand, you can imagine it. You can visualize her and visualize her doing that and so on. And so that gets into the objective model, which is goes beyond what one just subjectively experiencing, which can be incorrect. The objective model, the things in the objective model can be incorrect also. but they're somewhat more likely to be correct, and that's kind of why we call it objective. So at any rate, that's a quick run through, and I know that it's a little different than your worldview, but I think
Right.
you also find that it is helpful.
Okay, so yes, I think my outlook is very different.
Mm-hmm.
Although I do believe, I think you were insinuating before we were interrupted, that I do adhere to a lot of really almost all, not almost all. I do agree with everything you said, but I think there's a caveat.
Mm-hmm.
I would not. The way I hear you speak about that, well, let me just get right to it, I guess. What you had just said is a belief system that does not necessarily reflect the way things actually are. So when you described about us creating models and we compare our predictions, and that whether or not our predictions happen, that will be an indication of how accurate our model is. I think that is something that is not necessarily has to be the case. And
Well,
I think there are, go ahead.
Well, I'm not clear on what's not necessarily the case.
It is not necessarily the case that, well, let me put it to you this way. So in my orientation to understanding beliefs and reality, what's behind the curtain, is that even what you just described is a subjective point of view that you don't necessarily have to have. That you could be somebody who is a very strong theist and believe that everything comes from God, and you would not be creating models and testing and predicting that if you made a prediction of your model and it didn't work out, it wouldn't necessarily mean your model was wrong. It might mean that God chose not to bless that model from being accurate or something like that. And I think that speaks to my orientation of it, which
but
is
it's
that
still there's something still a little bit unclear. I was following you, and then I could tell. I could tell that probably some deviation in word usage or something that where then it was like, okay, we were on the same road, now we're on parallel roads.
Yeah, it fell apart. My mind is, I'm functioning at about 85 to 80% capacity. I'm still tired and run down, so I'm probably not thinking straight.
Well, no, I think that that it has to do with our respective belief systems and so on. I don't think that this is a matter of like dysfunction or something. I think I think this is a phenomenon that occurs among people all the time, and that we've made some pretty good progress in coming toward agreement.
Yeah, what I had meant by that is I might during this conversation have a tendency to be a little less clear, to take a little bit longer to formulate my ideas and make some mistakes because I feel very, very run down from I'm not like at 100% yet. But back to what I was saying was that that point of view that you had does not necessarily have to be the adopted viewpoint. And if that is the case,
then hold on. Let's stay with what you just said. The adopted viewpoint. What you're saying is that other people don't have to agree, and of course they don't. And of course they. Almost nobody does, because this model, I've not seen it occur in any other books or by anybody else than in my book on the mind-body problem. I think this is a somewhat unusual way of conceptualizing things, but I think it itself is a model, and so being a model, it can be fairly accurate or fairly inaccurate or somewhere in between, and that would mean if it was inaccurate, it would lead me to be making mistakes of some sort.
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
I think when you had said that, not everybody thinks and would agree with me. So
Right.
then the question becomes, well, who's right? I think when you say not everybody agrees with me, I'm hearing an implication, an implicit assumption that there is a ideal belief that is true. And that's something where we start to deviate in our orientation. I maintain that there is no ideal to believe in, kind of, so to speak, where I think you believe there is.
Well, I think that's not 100% accurate, but it's fairly correct. What I'm saying is that I am making the assumption that there is an ideal way of looking at things, and I'm trying to get there. But even if I feel like I have gotten there, I could be wrong. That goes back to Charles Sanders Peirce's definition of truth, that opinion toward which all opinion would tend if it tended indefinitely toward fixity. And that's the metaphors of the asymptote. In other words, the curve gets closer and closer to the asymptote, but you can never say that it has actually gotten to the asymptote. And so I'm saying that that right now I can't think of a better way of conceptualizing perception and belief and reality and so on. And I think it is consistent with those ways that we have as humans to arrive at highly accurate beliefs, the epitome of which is the sciences, with their scientific methods that involve the rules of logic and the rules of evidence that increase the probability that what we have arrived at is correct, but can always be questioned.
Right. When you had talked about being asymptotic to the truth, that I think also revealed, and that's what I was talking about, where there really is a difference here between the two of us, where the fact that it's asymptotic to something is important, and is an idea that I don't think in any kind of practical way is true, for lack of a better word, is accurate. It is inside of the human mind, inside of a person. I don't know how you want to call it. Inside it's really the phenomenology inside of someone's personal experience of the world, how they experience their subjective experience. Inside their subjective experience, there is nothing that differentiates your belief system from the belief system of a theist who believes that God is in control of everything, or a paganist, or whomever. It's just not. There's nothing different about about those two, about how you and someone else would experience that. So that kind of I think that begs the question, well, if you can't know what's behind the curtain, and your experience of what you understand to be the truth is the same as what another person understands to be the truth, even though it's completely antithetical and opposite to what you believe, I think that those in and of itself are very, very, very strong arguments to make the claim that truth is a completely subjective experience.
Okay.
Even going to the moon, even flying to the moon, you get the right kind of, or forget it, let's, or evolution or whatever. Let's take something really black and white, like going to the moon. You get a certain person who, doesn't believe in physics and believes that, kind of it never happened. It's a big illusion. It's a big hologram. For that person, inside of that person's subjective experience, their experience of that truth, so to speak, is exactly the same as the way you experience going to the moon as a validation of a model.
Okay. Now this is an example, I think, of the thing that you and I agree is a part of postmodernism, to oversimplify. Well, there's no absolute truth. There's your truth and there's my truth. And so we might as well just go have a beer or whatever else might follow, that. But very frequently it's, further discussion will be non-profitable and so on. I think that one part of what I have said does make the difference, and that is that the one indication that there is a reality that is independent of our beliefs about it is the ability to predict. And so if you take two different belief systems and you use those belief systems to, for instance, make predictions as to what will happen if you do this, that, or the other, you will find most likely at some point that one belief system actually leads to a mistake and the other does not. And I was noticing it. What's coming to mind is something that I just learned recently. Einstein came up with his equations having to do with the curvature of space-time, and made certain predictions about what would happen in the case of a solar eclipse, a I'm pretty sure it had to do with a distant star that was behind the sun, but the light waves bent as they went past the sun and curved them around so that they indeed entered, our telescope and so forth. And so therefore, a star that was really behind the sun would be seen as off to one side. And but at any rate, so he had some predictions, and an eclipse was going to take place, but there were a number of problems that interfered with making those observations. And shortly after that, he said, "Whoa, I have made a mistake. The equations should be such and such." And so that what I would predict would be something different. Well, then when the next solar eclipse came, it was consistent with his revised belief. But the belief that he had... And here is where Mike's power went off and we couldn't get it restored, so we're planning to continue our discussion next time.
Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we